In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to build a basic metronome in Max for Live. I think this is going to be a series of a few videos, we'll see. But today we're just going to start with the most basic, set a BPM and get a visual indicator of that BPM, all custom built in Max for Live. Now, right off the bat, I want to let you know I am not a Max for Live expert. In fact, I am basically a beginner. I have thrown together a couple of useful plugins for myself for my keyboard setup that you can find some videos about. They're pretty cool and unique, but also simple. And at the end of the day, I'm just compiling stuff and really just using my instincts and trying stuff until it works. And I've found that there just isn't a whole lot of helpful instructional material on Max for Live. There's a lot of old stuff. There's a lot of really advanced stuff coming out of Cycling 74's channel. But there's not a lot of stuff for just kind of the average beginner who might know a little bit, but doesn't have a handle of the basics. So I'm going to try and fill that void a little bit as I go. Because it'll also help me learn as I do it. So I want to show you this PDF here that I found. This is called Demystifying Max MSP. I'm only a few lessons deep, to be honest. And I kind of decided to stop these lessons for a little bit and try building a metronome because I was noticing there were some similarities and I thought it would be fun to try something that wasn't fully guided by this PDF. But I will say this is an excellent resource. A lot of great advice, a lot of really clear and concise explanations of various objects and various functions. So I highly recommend downloading this and, kind of following along, but also just using it on your own to figure stuff out. So anyways, without further ado, let's dive in. Got a blank Max audio effect here on an audio track, and we're going to open that up. So first things first, I'm going to drag these guys way down here out of the way. We won't need those for a while. We're not going to be working with any audio in this video. And we're just going to get started. So you double click anywhere, you can create an object. And the first most essential object for building a metronome would be the metro object. On its own, it does nothing, but let's explore it a little bit. Left inlet, start and stop the metronome. Right inlet, set the metronome time interval. And output the ticks of the metronome. So input, start, stop. That sounds like a toggle to me. So let's go ahead and add a toggle. We'll route it in. And as far as the output, well, we can use a button because if you saw there, a button will blink and send a bang, but it will also blink when it receives a bang. Connect those guys like that. All right, set those guys there and lock this, and we should have a functional, if incredibly limited, metronome. I'm going to turn it on and see what happens. Okay, it's blinking very fast, so fast that it looks inconsistent, though I'm sure it's consistent. So what do we need to do? Well, let's turn it off, and let's add an argument. So every object, I believe, well, maybe not every object, but objects generally take arguments, and the argument here is displayed, interval, number. So let's try 500 milliseconds. And let's go back here and turn it on. And now we can see each individual blink. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that this is 120 BPM. Why is that? Because 60 BPM would be 1,000 milliseconds per blink, right? That would be 1 second per blink, 60 seconds in a minute. And cut that in half, and we've doubled our BPM. So this is 120. Okay, great. So obviously, no one sets their metronome to millisecond values. At least I don't know of anyone who does that. So we need to do some basic math. And to do that, we're going to use the divide object. So create the object and hold the Option key and click on a Mac, that is. I'm not sure what it would be on a PC. But basically, one of those modifier keys will bring up the reference screen here. And this can be really complex for certain objects and be kind of overwhelming, but for this one it's pretty basic. And really we just want to see what the left and right inlets do. So the left inlet sets the left operand and triggers an output if we send it a number. Okay? A bang triggers a calculation, and this number box here sets the right operand with no output. So we can change this and then send a bang, and then we get an updated calculation. Or we could just change it and then move this guy around, and you'll notice obviously we're seeing whole numbers despite some pretty, odd calculations here. that's because we're not using floating point number boxes. But that's neither here nor there. We don't need to do that because we are going to just be working with whole numbers in this here video. So we want to set the left operand, and we'll do that with a message box. And we'll put, well, let me ask you first. How many milliseconds are in a minute? That's what we want to put here. The answer is 60,000. That's crazy. We're going to connect it, and over here we'll set our BPM. Since we know what 120 is, oops, message first, and then 120, we know what to expect. And one great thing that I've learned from that PDF is to always try and be one step ahead of yourself and predict what the computer is going to do based on what you've built, because that will that just keeps you in the right headspace and avoids surprise. Well, there will still be plenty of surprise, trust me. But anyways, I'm going to lock it, and if we click this one first, well, I'll click 60,000 first and see what happens. Interesting. Okay, we see 60,000 here, but surely if I click 120, we'll get 500, right? No, that's because this does not trigger an output. But if we set 120 and then click 60,000, we get 500. Okay, so right to left, and we get the desired value. So obviously this is a little cumbersome to do it like that, but let's just run a quick test and make sure this is working at, say, 240. 240 should give us 250 milliseconds. Click, click. Good. So it's checking out. So instead of a message box, what if we want to just, kind of select the numbers as we go? Let's try this. Okay, let's set it to negative BPM. What's that? 50. I'll just type 50, hit enter, nothing happens until I click this. 1200 milliseconds. Nice and slow. Okay, so we're seeing the basics here, and at this point we could connect these to our metronome and delete this argument here. And in theory, this should change. If we set this to 120 and then trigger the calculation, yeah, we've got the basics of a metronome. Very clean, very simple, but there's a lot more that we can do, because if we stopped here and we saved this as a device, we would run into some issues. So in theory, we've built a metronome. It does this nice thing, and we might as well just save it and get a taste for what it's like to save a device. So there are a couple of things that I want to see in my device. I'd want to see the on-off, so I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of comment boxes to label everything here. On, off, BPM, some sort of title like Max's Magic Metronome, and maybe here we just say output. I'm going to take all these, I'm going to make them a little smaller, especially these. And then I'm going to also just make them all centered, because centered looks better. And on-off goes here, output goes here, title we can just kind of drag up here, BPM. And now I want to select everything that we want displayed in our patch, right click, and hit add to presentation. And if we switch over to presentation mode down here, great. Oops, I missed the title. Now we can arrange everything just the way we want it. Okay, so here's our perfect little metronome. Turn it on. It clicks, but wait. Anytime we adjust the BPM, nothing changes. And that's because we're not triggering this button. So we could add this to our presentation and drag it up here. But then, really? I mean, what a confusing metronome. So you mean I have to set the BPM and then click a button that says 60,000 for anything to change? And you'll notice that it did just change there. So obviously that's not going to work. We're going to go out of presentation mode, and we're going to rethink this a little bit. Let's do something like this. We're going to add a button in the middle here, because a button sends a bang. So it's going to take whatever data is coming out of this, which would be a number, 62, And it's just going to turn that into a valueless bang, just saying like, boom, do something. Oops. And this should solve our problem, so that anytime we adjust this number, it will automatically trigger this calculation to update the millisecond value, feed that into the metronome, and affect the output. Let's give it a shot in presentation mode. And in fact, we no longer need this button anymore. So we're going to remove it from presentation. Present, turn it on. Oops, lock it, turn it on, and see what happens. Yep. It's working. But you'll notice there's a bit of a delay, right? So anytime we change it, let's start from a slow value here. Real slow. Blah, 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 blah. Come on, any day now. You know what probably happened is going into the negative numbers screwed it up. So I'm just going to turn it off and restart it. I'm not totally sure why it stopped there. But let's bring it down to 20. So this means every 3 seconds it's going to blink. But the problem here is after a blink, if I raise it to, say, 300 BPM, I'm going to wait to hit enter until the next blink. Ready, go. It doesn't change until it like finishes the previous cycle. So we want to figure that out and see if we can solve that. But, you know, we're making some nice progress here. So why is that? Well, it's because we need to send the metronome another bang through this inlet to basically tell it to reset at that moment to the updated value. So that's not all that crazy. We can just drag this in here. Now let's see what happens. Lock it, go into presentation mode, and, well, let's turn it on. 300, let's go to 20, and then let's go back to 300. Immediate, see? So that solved that problem, but watch this. Anytime I adjust the BPM, even if the metronome is toggled off, it's going to just turn it back on because we're sending a bang to the left inlet here, which basically functions as the on-off. So how do we solve for that? We use a gate. You're probably familiar with what a gate is, but a gate passes an input to an outlet based on the value of the gate. 0 closes the gate, non-zero opens the gate outlet. And here we put the incoming gated message. So this gate will basically act in tandem with the toggle, so that whenever we update the BPM, it will only cue the metronome to restart when it's actually turned on. I'm going to lock it, turn it off, go to presentation mode here, turn it on. Let's set it to 20, and let's do that same test, switching to 300 after the blink. Perfect. And let's see what happens if it's off, and I move this. Yep. Let's set it to 20 and turn it on. Good, so it's working. So that solved that. This would be a pretty good stopping point for a very basic metronome, but that's actually not true. But we're going to save it real quick, and we're going to find out what we haven't accounted for just yet. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to call it Max's Magic Metronome. And I'm just going to put it in presentation mode, freeze it, it's locked, save it, close it. And what the heck? Why is that all we see? Well, it's not loading in presentation mode. So this can be frustrating, and to solve for this, we go to the View menu, which I don't think you can see here, but it's up top. Come down, I guess we got to be in edit mode. Open the inspector window, and find Open in Presentation. A very important checkbox that can be so frustrating if you don't know where to find it. That will solve that problem for us. So let's save, present, freeze, and lock. Quit. Save. Hey, there we go. It looks good. So let's play around with it a little bit. Interesting. It's not working. Now, why might that be? Well, the issue here, well, first of all, we shouldn't be able to select negative BPMs, right? I mean, none of the, you know, there's a window. So we got a few updates we want to make because clearly this thing is not working. But the first problem was that this value, 60,000, had not been sent because we loaded it from scratch, and unless this is clicked, it's not going to update. So the first way we could solve for this is by patching this BPM into the 60,000 so that anytime we move this, it sends, sorry, we would need a button in between there. So that anytime we update this BPM, you'll see that button blink, and it will always ensure that 60,000 is loaded into the left operand here. Now that's an option. It works, but it's not the cleanest way about it because there is something designed just for this, which is load bang. What this does is upon loading the device, it will send this button, it will send this message to the divide object. So now if we freeze it, lock it, save it, quit, and I'm just going to go ahead and drag it in. At least it's not blinking like crazy. It seems to be working. Okay, cool. So what about if I typed in a number? What if I type in 20? Hey, it's working. Okay, great. So let's say I wanted to map this to a hardware control. Well, you'll notice that nothing here is lighting up. I can't map anything in MIDI mapping mode. So this is another issue we've run into, which is, wait a minute, that sucks. So to fix that, we need to swap out all of our number boxes, anything visual in presentation mode, for live objects. So we'll switch this toggle for a live dot toggle. And we'll switch this output for a, well, I mean, we don't have to because I don't think we'd ever map this to anything, but we might as well. A live dot button. It's a little prettier anyways. Okay, and let's see, we're gonna see this. So we'll switch this for a live dot bumper. Oops, live dot numbox, right? And then we'll just duplicate this routing. Once we do that, we can delete the old. Do the same thing here. One to the gate, one to the metro. Delete the old. Maybe make it a little bigger. Okay, and this one's not totally necessary, but let's just check it out. Is it working? Yeah, look, we get a little orange color there. It lights up, we're at 0. How about 100 BPM? Great, it's working. Okay, cool. So there was one other thing we wanted to address, which is that, oh right, we need to add these new guys to presentation. So, we'll select them, add a presentation, go to presentation mode, and place them accordingly. Voila. But if you recall, this loads at 0, right? That's a little annoying because that's a little unrealistic. So what we want to do is unlock the device here, click in here and set initial enable, and we're going to enable it to, let's say, 120. And then we want to make sure it's set to an integer value. And we're going to set that range from, let's say, 20 to 500. Okay, never mind, 275. I guess that's all we get. Well, that's kind of annoying. But that's okay. Most metronomes don't need to go above that. I didn't actually know that that was a limitation of a live button. That's not the case for a regular max number box, which behaves a little differently. You set the minimum and maximum value here, which would be 20 and 500. And then you can explore that full range. But what is a little annoying about the max number box is that there is no initial value setting here. So what you need to do is send a message, set 120, and set it to 120. And then you could use your load bang here to send that to that number box so that as soon as you load the device, it will always set to 120. It will automatically set your left operand in the divide object to 60,000, etc. But just mentioning that for the sake of mentioning it, because this live numbox solves most of those problems. So we're going to freeze it, we're going to lock it, and we're going to just check it, make sure it works. On 275, 20. Yep. And as soon as we bump up the tempo, it immediately adjusts the metronome. So I'd say we have a fully functional metronome here, and you'll notice that if we go into mapping mode, all of this is mappable. I don't know why you would map this because it's just an output, it doesn't do anything. But you can map the on-off, you could map this to an encoder so that you can adjust the BPM. But there you go, a fully functional visual metronome. And in the next video, we're going to upgrade this to display different beats and incorporate some sounds. And yeah, it's going to be fun. So we'll see you there.